Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and so thrilled to have you joining us for one of our talks today. Today, we're incredibly lucky to be joined by the wonderful Aaron Dominguez, who's currently starring in Hulu's Only Murders in the Building. And I wanted to start by talking about some of the material that you looked into that really helped to add some layering and context to your character. I know that John Hoffman, who's the co-creator and showrunner, one of the things that he did was give you the text of the Hardy Boys, because even though it's kind of just pulled out as a script reference, there's actually more context within your character's relationships that can come from looking at a text like that. And so I was interested how details like that and what some of the other texts and research materials were that you pulled into shaping your character for the show.
Yeah, good question. I very early on, when John started kind of explaining the different nuances and the relationships between them all, right? Because it was a little bit of a challenge as well, because as the story actually starts within flashbacks, right? To then where you kind of see the current situation or the current storyline as to how it goes. I had my fair share of questions as to like how to bring this character to life, and if and when would these kind of like little notes that he would give or little pieces give, when would they kick in, or when would the storyline uh, uh, kind of resonate the same within the audience? Because once again, it was like we were shooting flashback scenes in the middle sometimes of like shooting current scenes. So a lot of the context, a lot of times, that he would give to me was to just focus on what was on the page the day of. And we could talk about it fully within that. But I mean, the Hardy Boys books that he sent us very, very early on, I think it was while we were still in pre-production a few weeks before shooting the pilot, helped a great deal. We spoke briefly on the phone a lot, even as because I went through a little bit of a hiatus as well from shooting the pilot to then when I come back in, there was a fair amount of weeks. So there was times where I would be like, "Hey John, I know you're in the middle of shooting, but I have a lot of questions." And he'd be like, "No." He's like, "Ask away." And John was so good at doing that, and he was so had a lot of patience with me, because I know that there was times, because we also wouldn't get the scripts all the way through. You know, we'd have to, if we were block shooting, so we'd get episodes 1 and 2, and oftentimes we wouldn't even get them at the same time. It would be like, "Oh, we're just going to shoot the one, and then you got to wait to the next one." So there was a little bit of a trick there to kind of see how you kind of wanted to make your choices and have to wait and also be patient, but also have to create your own story as well. So like a lot of Oscar for me was finding that groundedness in what it was kind of like to be from New York, right? Along with all the different characteristics of like within the friendships that he has with Mabel and Tim, who is obviously played by Selena, and Juliet Seehey, and then Olivia, who is plays Zoe. So like all of those different dynamics also made for different friendships. So it was like I had to find out who Oscar was within the story, what he was kind of like, New York kid, Puerto Rican, all these different things. So it made for a lot of homework to do, and then a lot of off-camera building relationships with these friends. So yeah.
But I'm so fascinated with the way that you built this character, because so frequently in television you often don't have the end of your character's journey, and you may not have all the scripts and know all the details about where they're going, but because, to your point about the fact that this is a show that's in the present day and the flashbacks for your character are so crucial and build so much of his emotional facets and his reason for certain behaviors as well. And so how did you figure out and navigate the way that you were going to shape this character's emotional backstory and a lot of the relationship dynamics when you didn't have all of those details up front, given how pivotal they are to who he is in the present?
Yeah. I once again, it was a lot of it. I had to work on my patience. I feel like a lot of times as Aaron the artist, right? As Aaron the actor, because it can be a little nerve-wracking sometimes when you don't have all of the pieces to kind of create, right? And that's why there's somewhat of a balance and a trust, right, within you and your writer, and within you and the your other counterpart, whoever you're playing with. So with Oscar, what did help was that we, because they were they were flashback scenes. I got to kind of exist in those moments before we kind of like what the current story is. And once again, it was such a there was such good chemistry between John and I because of that, because he kind of was very open to having conversations with me, whether it was on the daily or every other day. He would call me into the office and be like, how are you feeling today? What questions do you have today? And I'd be like, great, thank you for asking. I'd pull out my scroll and I'd be like, I know I said it was 33 questions I had, but it's actually 103. Because yeah, there was a bit of a challenge, and there was a bit of a space where, you know, there's an unknowing of things, and that's scary sometimes. So there has to be a lot of trust to kind of be like, all right, cool. Like, I trust the writer, I trust the writer's room, I trust the creators of this to kind of be in control of like what we're dealing with now. But at the same time, I had to also be ready with the choices and with the backs and what the kind of the story that I had to create for Oscar on my own to kind of help drive him. I hope that answered the question, because now I feel like I'm in the world again, and I was like, oh yeah. So like I'm remembering all these different things.
Answered it in so much detail. And in terms of the dynamic and the way that your character comes into scenes, there's this very unique space for him because he's grown up in New York. He's grown up in this building. He has these relationships and friendships that are so intrinsic to him and so familiar. And yet, because he's been incarcerated for 10 years, there's also the element of him feeling like an outsider, and life has been existing without him, you know, and this, you know, it's that idea of like when you turn the lights off in your home and you can still find the way to the bathroom, maybe he can't find his way to the bathroom anymore, but he knows where it is. And so how did you navigate the way that he stepped back into these relationships and even just the physical location of this building and his home again?
Yeah, great question, by the way. That I felt like was a current issue within myself, right? Within my own experience, it was kind of similar to Oscar's, and as well, there was a few things that changed within the script and the storyline. I don't know how much I can give away as to what changed or what didn't, what made it, what didn't. But I remember at the beginning sharing with John, you know, Oscar to me felt a lot like a, you know, being the son of the superintendent of the building, right? So it's a swanky Upper West Side building, right? So everyone's very white collared, very upper middle class. If you think about it, or the way at least I thought about it, was that Oscar, although he's a part of this world, he's not really a part of it. You know, he comes from a blue collar background. You know, his dad is the superintendent, so maybe he doesn't make as much money. So he was kind of a kid that was brought up in a blue collared world, living in a white collared world. So from the beginning, I kind of let that be the driving force of like, there has to be something deeper for him, for then when he gets, for all these things to kind of add up to when he finally does, obviously terrible situation he goes through, gets, you know, goes to jail for a while, prison, comes back out, and then he has to kind of find his footing again, right? So a lot of times I also had to deal with the challenge of this being a 30-minute formatted show. So there was I had to kind of pick and choose how I wanted to deliver things, and then like kind of what dynamics I wanted to show if and when. And then with Selena, it made it so much easier because she's so poised, and then to where kind of going off of her, I wanted the nuances to be subtle, but that people could feel them, if that makes any sense. I didn't want anything to be very grand or anything big. I wanted to people kind of see Oscar rooted because he's already kind of lived out like as an outsider. And then when he finally comes out, you can kind of get to see a little bit as to where he's fighting for something. He does want to spend time with this girl and get to know her again and forget about his past. But then, you know, he's treading softly is all, which once again, it's been kind of similar experiences, but yeah, hope that answered the question once again too.
I was also really interested in terms of how that plays into not just relationship dynamics with characters like Mabel, but meeting new characters. So, meeting Steve Martin's character, meeting Martin Short's character for the very first time, because this is someone who, as a character, has trauma from his past and also has been betrayed essentially. And so I imagine that over these 10 years that there's a sense of finding it really difficult to trust people in, especially in new situations, if he feels like he can't even necessarily trust people from his past that he thought he was incredibly close to. And so when you stepped into a lot of those new character relationship dynamics, were you shaping it in a way where he's kind of stepping back and holding himself back a little bit with a little bit of mistrust before he allows people back in again?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I think that was definitely a part of it, right? There was another part of the of Oscar's character once again that I got more insight than what kind of is shown now, or the way things have ended up playing out. But there was a certain noble soft side to Oscar, um, that is the one where he when he comes out, because what kind of is leading him the whole time is kind of starting new, right? Is trying to start with a clean slate and forget about what did happen. And the driving factor to that is kind of Mabel and the opportunity that's presented to kind of like, just fully jump into whatever she has going on or whatever I have going on, and kind of finding the balance there as well. So there's definitely moments, and then we'll get to see more of those as well as the season continues, where you kind of see that hesitation within Oscar to kind of um, come up to where he's not really entirely sure where to go or what to believe, even within Mabel and their dynamic, because it's all new once again. Like you said, it's this person that's been dealt a challenging hand, and then he's coming out and trying to see where he can find his place within society again. So with Steve and Marty's characters, because in the scene where we all kind of meet each other for the first time in episode 5 is an interesting scene, because I remember at the same time I was dealing with my own dilemmas of being like, how can I play this like true to character, or like true to like life circumstances? Like, how could I really, uh, show what it would be like the dynamic could play in real life. I also had to remind myself a lot of times, like, at the end of the day, it's a lighter show, it's a comedic show, right? So I would always have to be like, I have to play to the truth within the scene. But even then, within Steve and Marty, because I'm a fan of Steve's show. When I was in prison, it was one of the DVD things that I feel like maybe that's why when I come up, I'm like, oh, okay, if these are an extension of Mabel, I can trust these guys. But you'll see later on in the episodes where his hesitation, not necessarily with them, but within the murder mystery of it all, he's kind of like, oh shit, where do I go from here?
Yeah. You're also dealt such a unique challenge tonally with this character as well, where, he has been incarcerated. There's all this stuff from his past. He spent a lot of time imagining, thinking about what life is going to be like and what these interactions are going to be like. There's small details like eating ice cream on the beach is something that he's been thinking about doing for years and hasn't had the opportunity to do. And you're trying to approach this entire storyline and character dialogue about what is it like to come back out into the world and what are the things that are important to you. And these are all quite weighty subjects in a way, and yet you're exploring it within a comedic sense. And so to your point about always really playing to the truth in a scene, how did you find that really specific balance of being able to honor everything within your character and still fitting into the tone that the show required from your character as well?
That's a hell of a question, Mara. I will be honest with you. I felt like a lot of times it was a challenge, because within comedy, you always have to play to the truth within a scene, right? Acting is reacting, all these fun things that we come up with. But at the same time, it's like, this is very much a real subject, a real thing that people go through. So there was definitely times where I was like, I don't know. I would be dealt with the thing of like, would I or would someone actually respond like this in real life or this on the third, and then within different contexts and different situations. So there was a lot of times where I was, once again, John, my writer, I can't speak highly enough about him, and Jess Rosenthal and Dan Fogelman, and because Dan would sometimes call in too and be like, "It's looking great. Like trust what you're doing." You know what I'm saying? Because there was times where I would show up to set and I'd be like, "Listen, because maybe things would change, right? Maybe they would give me a different line, not a different line, but different context within the story to kind of try it a different way." And because maybe I felt like the story was already, or the story or the character was going a certain way, I would be like, this is a challenge. And they would be like, just focus today on what's the context given to you today. And then the story would play out within itself. But at the same time, I was always like, I was always trying to find where I could find the root of kind of Oscar's, where he was grounded within. That way I wouldn't have to stress about delivering the punchline of the comedy. Because at the end of the day, Steve and Marty, they're going to bring the comedy at all times, all the time, any and every which way. And they did. And then it was great because Selena and I kind of brought the more grounded comedy. Like we would play to it, but at the same time, they made it easy for me to kind of stay a little bit more level-headed within. Because once again, comedy to me has always been a scary thing. It's especially working with people like Steve and Martin and Selena and all the other wonderful people that were attached to me, Ryan, Nathan Lane, Jane Lynch. When I was in these scenes with them, I was like, I need to find the truth within Oscar's character for this scene. And if I stay within that, the scene will play out. Because I would always be like, oh, what about my little punchline when it comes up? So it was a challenge and a half. A lot of the times I felt very insecure about maybe finding the truth, or finding like how grounded we could be within the scene. Because like you said, very real circumstances at times. Oscar was dealing with what people deal with in real life, but all lightheartedly in a 30-minute format of a comedic show. So it felt like a lot sometimes where I was like, shit, where can I find this guy? Where can I kind of come in and tell the truth in the middle? So once again, John Hoffman.
With his costumes as a character, what were the details that gave you? Because if you look at something as seemingly innocuous as him coming out and wearing a tie-dye hoodie, that could be a myriad of things. A hoodie allows you to disappear into yourself, but a tie-dye design is a very specific choice. It could be harkening back to 10 years ago, the types of things that he used to wear. And also he hasn't gotten to choose what he wears for 10 years. Again, going back to that idea of not being able to make personal choice.
Yeah. That wardrobe department was truly wonderful as well. They kind of every time we would come in and fit for initially from the beginning of the show as to throughout to like Oscar's kind of wardrobe choices, they would always leave it open for me as well, and what would feel comfortable within the storyline for me, which I greatly appreciated. And from the beginning, right, kind of with that notorious tie-dye hoodie, I think you brought it up perfectly too. This is essentially a kid that, when he went away, that's what he was. He was a kid. So when he's getting out, he has no sense of fashion. He doesn't really know what's going on. But then again, like if he wants to try something new, like a tie-dye hoodie, it's also something that could kind of, like you said, hide him in a sense, or like, once again, playing to the truth of like what it feels like if and when people are in those circumstances. And I can't fully speak to that fact because I've never gone through something like that before, personally, but I'm sure these people do, in a sense, like, remember, at least for myself within Oscar, right, there's definitely shame that I remember thinking to myself, like, this person must be dealing with some type of shame within something that, like, maybe he did or didn't do. We'll have to keep tuning in to find out. But Yeah, the tie-dye hoodie was definitely a choice of like a kid that is kind of essentially lost within that world. And then when he comes out, he kind of, I guess Oscar thought he looked good within that. And then so like the wardrobe changes as the season goes throughout with Oscar. You'll see him kind of make some better choices. But obviously the wardrobe kind of tells a story as well. Because I remember when we were choosing shoes, I was like, no, Oscar wouldn't wear that. He would wear that. And then to play to New York, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm wearing Tim's in the show. And it's kind of the winter time in New York. It's a very Timberlands are just a very New York thing. So shout out to all my family up in New York. They were very proud of that choice. But yeah, it was definitely it was the first time I had ever gotten creative power in that sense to kind of help tell the story with wardrobe with Oscar, and that team did a great job too. Jackie and all those people out there, so they were wonderful.
And when it comes,
Rafi, I miss you. I love you.
yeah. When it comes to his friendship with Mabel as well, it's not just the idea that this is a friendship and someone from his childhood. There's also the romanticism of the idea of paths that were never taken, what could have been, that he's had a lot of time to ruminate on and think about different potential scenarios, or what's it going to be like when I see this person again? What is that dynamic going to be? And so what was that kind of undercurrent of that romanticism that you wanted to bring into the friendship as they start to rekindle their friendship?
Yeah, 10 years is a long time to think of a lot of things, to play out a lot of different scenarios. Um, I remember when I first got because from the beginning, from the audition process, the scenes I kind of had to audition with were all the fun ones in episode 5. So I can talk about those because it's already out. I remember not having enough context within the audition process, right? But when I finally got on board and stuff, I remember once again asking a lot of questions to John, obviously since he was the creator, and Steve as well, like within where all of these things fell, like was it just like a platonic kind of friendship, or was there more? Because initially I didn't know a lot of the backstory that we kind of saw lightly. I think it was in 4 and 5, kind of in the scene where you see Zoe and I arguing, and there's these things that are said. So people are like, what was that kind of all about? So there was definitely a relationship and a friendship that was brewing within Oscar and Mabel. And then obviously to bring it to life in episodes 5, once again, I wanted to make these things obviously apparent, because you have to play to the truth of it all. But at the same time, I didn't want them, because obviously I wanted to see how long I could, you have to kind of see how you space it out in a 10 episode series, right? So you can't give too much away. And then a part of telling that story was also getting comfortable with Selena, and then also like figuring out how and what would translate well onto screen. And I think we did a great job. I mean, she was very easy to work with, and we would kind of bounce off ideas off of one another, and then there was times where we wouldn't, and we would just be like, let's just play, and then see the way it kind of comes out. So within, once again, like it was hard to kind of play to the truth of being away for 10 years, feeling all the things that in real life you would feel, right, and you would want to express, but also trying to time these things out within, once again, the format of a show and the timing and all these different things. So it made for an interesting dynamic, because we would also have to kind of see how we would play things, and how, and if and when we would. And then there's obviously choices that we were kind of presented the opportunity to go with, and then we would talk about them. And I know this all kind of sounds very vague. It's like, wait, what do you mean? And then but once again, I can't give too much away. The episodes aren't out yet. So, but yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, it was another challenge.
And when it comes to your career in the industry as well, you've mentioned that you've always found comedy to be more of a daunting space as a performer because there are so many very specific technicalities and rhythms to it. And with everything that you were talking about, where you really still have to find the truth and ground it within that. So there's so many different facets to what is required of an actor within a comedy performance. And so through working on this project, how do you feel that this has brought you into a different space in terms of your own personal comfort and the skills that you've had the opportunity to develop as a comedic performer as well?
Hmm. Good question. I obviously being in the moment, right, is always something that's spoken about within not only acting but within performing. Period. Because within there lies the truth, and within there lies the magic, and all the different things that can be created in the space. But yeah, comedy has always been kind of a thing that I've been a little bit reluctant to kind of try and dive into because of the technicalities, and because it's, if we're just being honest, it's hard to make somebody laugh. That's just the truth. Especially within any type of entertainment. I'd like to think of myself as a funny guy within my friends, but when it comes to kind of playing those things on TV or film, it's very different. So getting to work alongside Steve and Marty, was a huge dream for me, because there's a reason those guys have worked for 40 plus years in this industry and have had the success that they've had, right? And that type of dynamic that seems so easy and pure within them, right, is not something that happened overnight. And one could say, oh yeah, but they've been best friends for X amount of years. I've been best friends with some of my friends for X amount of years too, but I bet we could make people laugh the way that they do on screen. So it's definitely, there was definitely times where I would, if I wasn't on set, or if the scene wasn't necessarily one where I was in, I would always find myself like in a corner just trying to watch what their process was like. Whether it was that they were super technical about the lines or the context within the scene, or if they were kind of trying new bits out, or was it more improv than anything. This show in specific didn't give too much time or space for us to improv. We didn't really improvise too much. But I got to kind of see what both of their processes were kind of like, in the sense of like, I don't want to say that Steve and Marty are the same, because they're not. But the way they went about the work was kind of similar. I would see the way that they would kind of, before a take or something, if they both asked for a moment, they would kind of, especially Marty, I would see him oftentimes, his script, and I'm kind of the same way, would have notes everywhere. I was going to say thousands of notes, but that's kind of excessive. But there was a lot of notes everywhere. And every time he had a new thought, he would write it down. And then he would go off for a few seconds, kind of run it a few times, see how he would kind of want to play to that, then come back. And so it was very impressive and humbling to kind of see how they were able to come up with different choices every take if they were asked to. And that only comes from, that's what it felt a lot of times like. It felt like a master class. But that only comes from, once again, them to working as long as they have, but also having the dedication to and the work ethic to kind of work at these things. So what I took away from that was there was a moment within episode 6 where the context of the scene had kind of changed from what we originally had on paper. And I found it a little challenging, because it wasn't necessarily the way I had been playing Oscar, or the way I knew Oscar to kind of be at that moment in time. And Marty pulled me to the side at one point, and he said, he said, trust your gut. He said, you're already there. He was like, the way you've been doing it, he said, forget about all the technical bullshit that they're giving you. You know this character more than anyone here. He was like, because you're playing it. He was like, trust your gut. He's like, you're already there. And that's it. And one of the greatest kind of what I don't know what I'm thinking out, but not praises, but Marty pulled me aside once again after we had finished that scene or kind of finished the day, and his eyes were teary. He had teary-eyed from this last episode from one of the scenes, and he was like, "Damn," he was like, "I knew you were good when we started the show." He was like, "But watching you just finish that scene," he was like, "You're a damn good young actor," and he like tapped me on the back like a grandpa. And if that feels kind of good, you know, because to be able to stand toe to toe and to go to work every day with individuals like Steve Martin, Martin Short, Selena Gomez, and then the rest of the cast that's kind of on the show with the creators of a show like this, it's a dream come true. And then for the mutual respect to kind of also be given, because, you know, it's not, let's just say that, you know, sometimes you might work with people that, you know, whatever, X, Y, or Z, the work isn't what you thought it would be or whatever. But to kind of get that response from them, and Steve as well, there was a few times he would grab me to the side and kind of just give me some nice feedback. It feels good. It feels good. So.
That's a pretty incredible seal of approval. And I have to say that, you know, I know everybody is so curious about who the murderer is going to end up being, but the actual investment in the show is because of the characters and because of the performances. And so just want to say thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, Aaron.
Thank you, man. Absolutely.